Greetings, beautiful people. My name is Simon Javan Okelo, and you are listening and watching the Madaraka Podcast here on YouTube. But we are physically in Georgetown. This is south of Seattle, in a really nice space known as the Lab at the Seattle Drum School of Music. And today I'm really privileged to be with one of my incredible brothers, James Miles. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic.
Of course. For those who are meeting James for the first time, this is a brother who has written a book. We are going to talk about his book a little bit.
Right.
But he's also done a lot of work when it comes to being an educator and being a father and just being a good brother in society.
I try, man. I try.
Yeah, man. And one of my favorite things is to talk about people's stories, because I love storytelling. And all the time, almost every day, because I'm a father myself, I reflect on where did I come from? Because my kids are always curious. I'm raising them in a place where I didn't grow up, you know?
Right.
So I want you to take us back. One of the things that really fascinated me about your story when I was reading your book was how at the age of 5 years old, you really didn't care whether your parents would just leave you, in school and they would go away. You know, you're just so relaxed. You're like, okay, am I going to live here now? You know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So take us back to that moment and just being, growing up in Chicago. How was that?
Yeah, growing up in Chicago was great. I grew up in a pretty seminal time, into the 70s and into the 80s. And it was fantastic. And also at the same time, it was the rise of the crack epidemic and the AIDS epidemic. So I grew up in a predominantly gay neighborhood in Chicago that was mostly white. Our family was one of the few families of color in the entire neighborhood. Chicago's a city neighborhoods, everything segregated. You have your white neighborhood, your black neighborhood, your Mexican neighborhood, your Puerto Rican neighborhood, your gay neighborhood, your lesbian neighborhood, like you name it, it's just broken down.
Yeah.
So growing up, as a black family, as like very black, like Afrocentric, black power. My father was a member of the Black Panthers, knew Fred Hampton. So like that was part of growing up for me.
Yeah.
So leaving the house, entering whiteness was not really something that was strange for us. It was like, never doubt your race, never doubt your history. We are powerful people. So having that as a young person really cemented that self-confidence, that knowledge of self that's, part of hip-hop. So I remember, like, my first memory is that of darkness. It's in my book, but pretty kind of funny reflecting on it. My eyelashes grew so long, they turned into my eyeballs, and I couldn't see. So they operated on my eyes, and part of that was temporary blindness for like a week or 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Just so my eyes could recover. During that time, I noticed that all my other senses became heightened, because I had to rely on them, which was sound and touch and smell and taste.
Yeah.
So that really changed the way, at a young age, I was 4 years old, changed my perspective of people. Like, okay, some people can't see, some people can't hear, right? Some people can't walk. But guess what? We're all people. Yeah. So even at a young age, I was like, okay, this is a world in which I can navigate and find community no matter who I talk to, because I know in the essence, we're all people.
Yeah.
So that was really key for me. And then, the school thing, that was just, from a young age, I was just like my own person.
Yeah.
My dad before he passed, we took a picture for Christmas one day. And my kids were there, my niece was there, my brother was there, and I'm just in the background by myself, just watching everything, making sure everyone's all right. And because he was in the hospital, he's like, man, that's such a James thing to do, just to be in the back, make sure everything's cool. It's part of the fun, but doesn't need to be involved in the mix.
Right.
So when I was 5, I was like, told my mom, do I live here now?
Yeah.
Right. She was like, tears in her eyes. No, we'll come get you. And I was like, oh, okay. Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't like used to being abandoned.
Yeah.
That wasn't it. It was just like, I could take care of myself.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I can figure it out. And I think that figuring it out has always stuck with me.
Yeah.
For 40, almost 50 years. Like, I can figure it out. Let's figure it out.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
when I was reading, a lot of our conversation is going to be centered around your book.
Yes.
You know, when I was reading your book also, I read an excerpt from your brother, you know, your younger brother who
Right.
spoke very, very highly of you.
Yeah.
I don't know if my brother would say such good things about me. Oh, well, maybe, you
Yeah.
know. But it was just fascinating to see what they learned just by observing you,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
And I feel that in the world that we live in today, we've lost the value of observation, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
because we are so distracted, you know, there's so much going on that we are all always, you know, of course there's social media, but there's just so much around life that distracts you from actually even studying people around you and learning something from them, you
Right.
know. But in reading that excerpt, I also learned how some of the icebreakers that he learned from you, you know, like going to a formal education setting with sneakers,
Yeah.
and you know, and just making students respond to learning in very unique ways, you know. But I feel that just to take a quick run through what you're doing now,
Yeah.
I feel like that's what you're doing with your life. You're breaking the ice in how the creative sector runs in the city of Seattle.
Yeah.
I, having been in a men's group with you,
Yeah.
I also see how you engage with people, that you're always, you know, in a unique way trying to understand and share knowledge, but also be yourself, you know. I just want you to speak about the value of authenticity, because I
man.
feel that
Yeah.
your book is about that, your TED Talk is about that, and your life is also about that. But that word of authenticity is also used in poor ways these days,
Yes.
that it has lost its meaning. But I just think being yourself, you know, is a job these days.
It's definitely a job, just to try to not fit into someone else's paradigm of how they see you, or even just your identity.
Yeah.
I refuse to be put into a box. And I think that started from a young age, you know, which is why I was happy to be, let alone at school.
Yeah.
So I started my career as an accountant. And this is important, because I sucked at that job. I was terrible at it. I was good at mathematics, but I sucked at the job of accounting because it wasn't with people. And my parents knew that. They saw that from a young age. And when I would come home from work, they'd be like, yo, you don't like this job. And I was like, no, I mean, I'll do it. You know, at that point, I was like, okay, this is what I do. I'll be an accountant, and then at 5 o'clock, I'll go do something else, right? I'll go create something. And then one day, my parents just called me. And they were like, yo, you got to stop this job. They're making you depressed. You're not happy.
Yeah.
You wanted to be an artist. You're an actor. Act. Quit.
Yeah.
And so that did it for me. I was like,
Yeah.
had this degree from Morehouse College, and, you know, a super mathematician. I was on the cover of Ebony, not on the cover, I was in Ebony magazine as one of the top graduates in the country. And I mentioned international business is what I was doing.
Right.
But I was like, yeah, I can still do international business, but from my lens as a creative.
Yeah.
And my father and my mother telling me, like, quit being an accountant and follow your passion as an artist changed my life.
I love
was like,
that.
yeah, I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. And so wherever I go, I'm always an artist. And any sector I've been in, you know, I've been in for-profit, nonprofit, small business, large business, professor, which I currently still do, work for the city of Seattle, on stage, off stage. I've always like, I'm just gonna be me, and that's it. And for years, the reason I became an actor is funny, because, you know, I had a speech impediment, I had a stutter, you know, I'm a light-skinned brother, you know, I was like kind of insecure about not being dark, and I was like, oh, you know, I want to be black, you know, as history defines it, right? History defines it. If you look at the most revolutionary brothers in history, from Haile Selassie to Malcolm X, they were light-skinned brothers, right? Fighting for the community. And I was like, okay, maybe I can own that a bit more.
Right.
And so as I started owning that a bit more, I became more interested in actually providing that kind of love to all the students I worked with, that you should love yourself, and your love of yourself will propel you further than you trying to be someone else. Like, you know, we're from hip hop. Hip hop is always like, trying to fit into like, oh, you know, I'm a drug dealer, I'm a gangster. And I'm like, nah, you could be all the above and just be you. So young people, adults, don't try to be someone you're not. Just be you.
Right.
And that has propelled me, and I'm hoping it propels others. The students I work with are always like, yo, you're always you. Like, I can go back between talking with very hip-hop lingo to talking like a professor, and sometimes in the same sentence. And I think everyone should be able to be who they are. So, like, to me, authenticity is number one. If you're going to be a great teacher, you have to really love teaching. I worked with this teacher that says, you know, I took this job to have summers off. Then you should quit. That's not a reason to take a job, to have summers off. You take a job as an educator because you love educating. You love teaching. And I've said this before. If you don't know what young people are into, if you don't listen to what they're into, you don't ask them questions, you're in the wrong profession.
Right.
You know, you should be like, you should be an accountant. Right. don't work with people if you're not going to be your authentically self every time.
That.
Yeah.
I love that. I want you to speak a little bit about your acting career.
Yes.
You know, because I feel that you've accomplished a lot, and I just want you to share more so that people understand the depth of your gifts in that regard. But I also, you know, just speaking about your acting career reminds me also of a story I read in the book where you started this program in the New York area where you guys would go to school with teaching artists, and you were literally trying to transform how education was being provided to kids. Instead of providing the education through the rigorous, rigid structures of education as we know it, you guys were going and listening to students and understanding where do these students come from, how do they learn best, you know. So speak about your acting career a little bit, and then how that led you to starting this amazing program.
Yeah, my first experience with theater was on Broadway. My aunt Leah was in a show with Eartha Kitt, and I came backstage, and this is like 79, 80, 81. I came backstage, and Eartha Kitt growled at me, and I said, ooh, I like her. I was a kid. I was like, I like her. I want to do whatever she's doing. You know, because I see her on Batman as Catwoman. I was like, I want to do something in the arts. And then it wasn't until years later when I was in high school, and I saw The Merchant of Venice by Shakespeare. And the lead character, Shylock, was played by a black man. His daughter was played by an Asian American woman. And I was sitting next to my best friend, who's still my best friend, actually lives in Bothell, who's Chinese American. And I said, yo, that's us on stage. And that hit something to me. I was like, oh, this isn't just like Mork and Mindy. I love Mork and Mindy, but, you know, it's not just Three's Company. I love Three's Company, but it's not just MASH. I love MASH, but it's our faces up on stage, right? I want to see people that look like us. So I said, that's it. I want to become an actor. So my first TV show was on BET in '94. It was called Booking It Back to School. LL Cool J, Queen Latifah, and Dougie Doug. And Dougie Doug was my mentor on the show and my mentor off camera. And he just was like, yo, you're funny, man. Just keep pursuing it. Don't just stay you. And I was like, okay. I'll just stay me. And I kept doing this. I kept working, you know, not auditioning, not getting the job, auditioning, getting the job. And then after a while, I think this was after I did Law and Order, I was like, man, I'm just auditioning for drug dealers, gang members, and drug users. There's gotta be something else. So I started to turn down all this work. You know, people would offer me jobs, and I was like, nah, I'm not playing another gang member, another drug dealer. What are the kids gonna think? And as soon as I said that, what are the kids gonna think? Something hit off my mind. Like, well, if I'm part of the issue, if they're seeing images of black people on screen, and it's just drug dealers, the gang members, then let's change that narrative, right? So then I said, all right, what else can I do? I did live improvisation, started working with different writers, and I worked with this writer in Portland, Maine, doing 2 plays of hers, and just making these characters come alive with like culturally, and I'm gonna say this, culturally responsive performance. You know, like we always think of like the places where black people live and brown people live as like negative. But I want to be proud of the place you're born and say, like, this is the hood I came from, and I want to lift it up. So I did this play, and the writer's Puerto Rican. And she was like, yo, I gotta make this young person sing right now. He's a parody. So I helped her make this character sing, just like making it real, but also positive and fun and engaging. And she loved it. So 2 years after that, she calls me. She's like, yo, I'm doing this play. Can you be in it? And I said, yeah, for you, I'll do whatever. She's like, it's a musical. And I said, nah, I don't really do musicals.
Yeah.
She's like, please, you'd be so good. We're working on this character, Sonny. We don't know what to do with him. And I said, all right, give me the script. And I read it, and I was like, oh, this is hip hop. Oh, this is a hip hop musical.
Yeah.
And she's like, all right, well, I want you to meet the writer. I mean, the composer and the person with the lyrics. Here's Lin-Manuel. Here's Bill. And I said, all right, cool. What's up, guys? They're like, yo, we really need help with this play. And I said, all right, cool. All right, let's do it. So I played Sonny in the Heights, right? Which is right before I went to Broadway, was when I left. And I just helped that character come alive. Hip hop musical. The first hip hop musical really that blew up.
Right.
And at that point, I was like, all right, I was deeply into hip hop. I knew hip hop. I was friends with hip hop artists. Common was a friend of my father's. So I was like, okay, yeah, what else can I do?
Right.
And after a couple of years of working in the industry, and I was still teaching, like after school, sometimes volunteer, sometimes paid, but mostly working with young people to say like, yo, you don't have to be what people put on you, right? And I realized that the best way to do that was to become a teacher, not just talk about it when I'm a guest in the class.
Right.
And that's the transition. After I was talking to Michael J. Fox on the Michael J. Fox show, and Wendell Pierce, who's on The Wire. They were both on the show together. And Wendell said something like, yo, when I'm not acting, I go back to Louisiana where I'm from and teach. And I said, yeah, that's what's up. And then Michael J. Fox, I was like, yo, why are you doing this TV show? You're Michael P. Keaton, you're Marty McFly. He says, I want to put a face of Parkinson's so people know it's a real issue that we can solve, but we have to invest in it. And I said, thank you, Michael J. Fox, I quit. And I walked off set. And I was like, I'm done being an actor. I need to put a face to education so that young people that look like me say, like, there's a future ahead of me. Yeah. And so I called my buddy and I said, yo, I quit acting. I've been doing some teaching artistry stuff for a while. I got some ideas.
Right.
And he took a chance. It's like, all right, I'll give you a chance. Let's see what you can do. And I took that chance and that self-confidence I had and built this program that toured the world, wrote a book with it, produced albums with Talib and Sadat. I think Busta did a track. Jadena did 2 albums. Soul Science Lab. Like, we had a bunch of people on these tracks.
Wow.
And I was like, all right, there's something behind it.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into education, was Michael J. Fox, and the latest iteration of that.
Yeah.
And then before that, it was like always in my blood. That 1990 album by BDP, Boogie Down Productions, called Edutainment, Education, Entertainment. What's that mixed together?
Yeah.
That's been my ethos for 30 plus years.
I love that. I love that. So for me, having known you,
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us, when you know someone,
Yeah.
you don't really know them.
Right.
Because I feel like I just knew you really well in the last year.
Yeah.
Because then I began, first of all, I saw your TEDx.
Yep.
And then you helped me apply for TEDx myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw your book. Actually, before I saw your book, I saw you speak.
Right.
And then you spoke before just launching your book. I think I was at an event
right, at
where
the luncheon, yeah.
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 So, and then I saw you on stage. I was like, wow, I know this guy, But I really didn't know him because I felt like, wow, I just discovered you, And I feel like, a lot of us, especially brothers, we have friends that we really don't know.
Right.
Oh
yeah.
We have family that we really don't know, because we are so overwhelmed by the rat race that we don't take time to read each other's books,
Yes.
to listen to each other's podcasts, to listen to each other's music, to show up at each other's shows, And I just appreciate how we've been engaging over the last couple of weeks.
Likewise.
And there's a statement in your book also in the introduction where you speak about how I think it's your life purpose, where you're now speaking about how you want to see the education system completely change, and how you feel that hip-hop is a critical piece to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a summary of your entire book, and it seems like it's a summary of your entire life too. Can you speak to that just for a moment before we transition and go into the work you're doing with the creative economy in Seattle?
Oh, yeah. Hip-hop is the greatest example of the creative economy. So there's a link right there. Right? Because hip-hop was birthed out of nothing. In fact, less than nothing, right? There's fires roaring through the Bronx. There was mass poverty. You had a highway that was cutting across the community, destroying homes and houses. And you had these young people that weren't taking it. They're like, yo, we'll plug into the light stand, right, to have power. We will get water from somewhere else. We will make music off our desks, right? We will dance on the concrete where there's no floor. We'll just put a cardboard box down to dance, right? There was no stopping hip-hop. And out of that came growth, economic opportunities. And that's why hip-hop is so important to me, because I had a stutter as a kid, speech impediment. I didn't want to talk. I didn't see myself reflected in the music. MTV didn't play,
Speaking about that, let me take you even back further.
Yeah.
In your book, you also speak about categorization, how schools were about categorizing people.
Yeah.
That touched me, because me, growing up, we also had, if it was in the British system, we have Form 1, 2, 3, and 4 for high school. Here, I think it's grade 9.
9 through 12, yeah.
So if you had grade 9, you had like 5 different grade 9s.
Mm-hmm.
We had like yellow, green, or P, R. If you're in R, you're almost a gangster,
Yeah.
And in fact, I was in R. In R. P, you're like close to R,
Right.
And then you had A, B, those are like the top-notch students, the least creative, the most strict. They come from wealthy families who can pay for them to have like 7 different tutors, for every subject,
Right.
Anyway, so that really touched me, because I feel like the education system is categorized worldwide.
Categorized.
And it's actually also similar to how gentrification and also segregation in Chicago and across the world is. The way school system is segregated and categorized is also how real society is,
Very much so.
Here in Seattle, we have people who live on Massa Island. They almost have a guarantee at a shot at life.
Almost, pretty much. It's guaranteed.
And then the kids who are in the A classes in our school are also almost guaranteed a shot at life, These days, as Madaraka Festival is growing, is when I hear from some of the kids from the A class. They're like, bro, I see you're doing very well. Now they're calling me bro. How can I get a visa to come to the US to Madaraka Festival?
Right.
And I'm like, now you need help from me,
Yes.
Now that passion, that thing that was making me jump over the fence and leave school and going, I was DJing in high school.
Right.
By Form 3, I was like one of the well-known reggae DJs in my hometown.
That's great.
But I'm telling you, the trouble that put me through. Your book is great.
Thank you, man.
Talk about categorization.
Yeah.
Even in places of work, I've worked in corporations here in America where I've been a mailman. The mailman is in the basement. You don't even have a window. That's categorization. The CEO has the best view, the water.
Man. Yeah.
Anyway, speak about that for a moment.
Yeah. The first time when I started school, I was in special ed, right? Because my speech impediment and because I was left-handed. Then I was put in, it was called regular class, R.
Yeah,
right?
That must have been so hard.
Yeah, but it wasn't hard for me because these are all these people are my friends.
Yeah.
So when you don't really put words to it, you're like, oh, I'm in this class with my friends, and I'm in this class with my friends. So going from special ed to regular to gifted and then to international baccalaureate, I was in all of those classes in different subjects. And it was weird how I was treated. Same person. I'm still James Miles, right? Fresh professor. Not the fresh professor at that time, but still James Miles. And in special ed, I was treated like, oh, he doesn't know much. In regular, I was treated like, well, he could be a criminal. In honors, oh, he could have potential. I don't know. In IB, it was either, oh, he's very smart or how do you get in here, right?
Yeah.
So you were looked at differently but you're not different. We're just categorized based on how you performed on a test that school day, that hour, that year, and that point in your life when you don't know what's personal is going on with someone's life.
Yeah.
So you see that, on a global scale of how young people are just categorized based on something that's mutable, right? I can know something today and forget it tomorrow. Does that mean I'm less smart? No, it just means I forgot what we were talking about because other things went into my brain. Maybe my father just passed a year ago yesterday. So maybe I'm thinking about that, right? Those things happen, right? So that's, and I would say, and this transitions to the work we do. The worst thing that happened to music is categorization.
Right.
When they started saying, "Oh, this is black music, this is white music, this is hip hop, this is pop, this is classical, this is country." If you listen to Beyonce, she's still Beyonce. You buy Beyonce not because she's playing R&B or she's on a hip hop track with Jay-Z or because she's playing country. You buy Beyonce because she's a talented artist. You listen to Beyonce because no matter what she puts out, even if it's the Renaissance dance music, you won't listen to Beyonce. But you go into a store and you're like, "Oh, I want to hear Beyonce." They're like, "Well, which Beyonce?" She's not in classical, she's in this. Don't categorize people. Just let them be. Right? We are so many different things. Right? We cannot be defined by one thing.
We're supposed to be so many different things.
But like,
I love that.
We are shut down. Even in the work, some of the work I do, I'm a creative. I work in the creative economic development. They're like, "Oh yeah, this is you. You're creative, so this is you." And I said, "Well, this is something creative, but also so is that." Like, you're talking about restoring buildings, that's creative. You're talking about supporting community building, how do we support, communities to grow their wealth? That's creative.
Right.
Everything I do is creative.
Right.
So don't put everything into a box and say like, "Oh, you should only touch things that touch theater and music and dance." No, I touch everything because to uplift the entire city, to really get every community some value, to be the hip hop, they can turn nothing to something. That's creativity.
Right.
So I eschew, get rid of any categorization. Yeah.
I love that. That. I think it's so dangerous when you think about the bigger problems we're having globally as a human race.
Right.
Because of categorization, you find that the Chinese, you support the West, you support the East, and that, it's such a problem.
It's a problem, man.
Yeah, it's such a problem. Now, when you think about Seattle, I want to bring us back to Seattle a little bit and the work you do a little more as we get closer to the end of our time together. Seattle is like the city of creativity in essence. You find Sam Mix-a-Lot is from here. You find Macklemore, Wararunga. Right. I am from here. You are from here.
Yes, yeah.
But you also find Jeff Bezos. You also find Bill Gates. You also find Boeing. These are all creative projects.
Right. Yeah.
Because the essence of all of this big brand, Starbucks, was creativity.
That's it.
Taking risks, exploring, being curious.
Right.
And I think you are the center of actually giving BIPOC and black creatives and people like me are now clamoring to become the next big thing when it comes to the creative industry globally.
Right.
Look at Madaraka Festival. It started here 10 years ago. If it were not for Seattle, we would probably still be here, but not as strong as we've become. Right. I feel like the Seattle community supported the growth of Madaraka Festival, but what you're doing, your office didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
And I feel like it's going to catalyze the growth of the creative sector, So just speak a little more about why your office and your organization within the city of Seattle was created and what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, so there was Kate Becker, whom we all know.
Right.
She's the King County Creative Economy lead. She had a position in the Office of Film and Music, which at that point was just the Office of Film. This is about 10 years ago. And her directive was to get more filming done in Seattle. James Keblis, my predecessor, became the director of he was creative person, I don't know his title, creative director in the Office of Film, and then they added the music. And so then my position came about as creative economy. And my goal was to do just that, to say, like, we're not just filming music. We cannot be categorized as just two different disciplines in the creative sector. We are the sector. We are the Bezoses. We are also the Gates. We are the Simons, right? We are everyone. Because, as you said, once you're part of the Seattle culture, they embrace you. And I wonder oftentimes, like, how do we package that and then bring it to other places? You know, well, I was just in Texas for South by Southwest, and they have a glowing great creative economy, and everyone knows what's happening in that city. Like, oh yeah, this is the place to go. This is the place to go. There's been less overturn. I'm posturizing. I'm not posturing. I'm not sure. There's been less overturn of businesses in Austin than there have been here, right? So we need a little bit of a runway to boost the stuff we do here. Like, you know, Madaraka's been around 10 years. That's because of Seattle was like, yo, we got to provide this runway for One Vibe Africa to put this on. Thank God. We need more of that more community development and community building in our city. So, to answer your question, my job is to think about creatives in our economy and to think about our economy creatively. So that's workforce development, how to get people into jobs. That's cross-sector collaboration, how to get creatives into different businesses, how to think about education specifically, right? Our education system's pretty, like, old school. Yeah. It's like, you know, there's very, very little creativity behind it. They took the arts out of the classrooms. They took civics out of the classrooms, home economics, sex education, driver's education, all out of the classroom just to have reading, writing, and arithmetic. And that's at a loss for our students. So how do we think about that differently? Let's bring One Vibe Africa into the classroom so the young people of all identities can see, like, oh, this is what that is, right? This is the human element. And I think when we're able to do that on, like, a larger scale, our city will be fire. It'll be one of the places that people will crawl and fight to get to because there's so much stuff here. Our issue is that we're so siloed. Like, the music sector doesn't talk to the film sector, doesn't talk to the theater sector, doesn't talk to the dance world, doesn't talk to the visual arts world. When we're all in here together, why not combine forces and put on something dope at a local museum and have a DJ there and then have a performance with some live dancing and then have someone paint, like, and then get the tech sector here. Like, that's what we need in this city, and that's what I'm trying to do. So,
I love that.
Yeah.
If someone wants to get a copy of your book
Yes.
And to stay in touch with you, how do they do it?
freshprofessor.com. I'm also online at fresh_professor.
Excellent.
Yes, and Gotta Stay Fresh is the name of my book. You can find it on Amazon, but definitely find it on my website, www.freshprofessor.com.
I love that.
Yeah.
So look at this camera back here
Yes.
and say your name and ask everyone who is listening and watching to subscribe to Madaraka Podcast.
What's up, James Miles? I hope you're listening and watching. If you're not, check out the Madaraka Podcast right now. Simon Okelo is my man. Do it.
Thank you. And if you joined us for today's conversation, my name is Simon Javan Okelo. I am the CEO and founder of Madaraka Festival and your host here at the Madaraka Podcast. Today's guest has been incredible, as you've seen and heard, James Miles, and he's doing incredible work. Grab a copy of his book and support the work that he's doing with the city of Seattle. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to my producer, Jay Codes, for making this possible. Peace and love.
Awesome.